I'm joined now by Oguche Agudah, who is founder HRISP Partners, to review some of our top stories in more detail. Good morning to you, Oguche. Many thanks for joining Business Week. Good to have you on the show again. To see you again.
Nice to be here.
You're most welcome. Let's begin with the new CBN survey, which reveals that 65% of Nigerians are demanding lower interest rates. Will the MPC cut rates amid public pressure, in your opinion?
Well, it's happening on Monday, Tuesday. So I think rates will go down because inflation is trending down. But it's a double-edged sword because if you do bring rates down, then inflation might go back up. Yeah. But I think the sentiment just speaks to Nigerians. We want lower borrowing rates because, you're able to get loans and, just in terms of the economy, purchasing power, it's better for the economy. In that report, you saw that most households spend most of their money on food, less on education, and they're not spending as much on luxury. So that feeds into the sentiments in the economy and people wanting lower rates, people wanting stable prices. CBN has done a good job so far, but people still want rates down.
So we're already getting a good feel of what direction things will go, as one would expect in any case. Let's look next at PENCOM's revised equity limits. Can this 5 trillion naira liquidity drive sustain the NGX rally?
I think so. So NGX has done year to date about 31% and is the second highest in dollar terms in the world. Even higher than what other emerging markets are doing, about 11% year to date. And is driven primarily by what this new rules by PENCOM. So it's going to release about 1 trillion naira on the average as a base case to invest more in equities among RSA Fund 1, Fund 2, Fund 3, and RSA Fund 6 active. So what that means is that PFAs have more money to spend on the equity market, listed equities. So that has driven the rally, and I think that will drive it going forward. It gives them more options, enables them to take more risk, and hopefully it's more income for the PFAs, but more importantly, the RSA holders.
And certainly that's always very welcome. We'll get some degree of buoyancy as well, hopefully. Let's look next at, as you know, CBN Governor Olaimi Cardoso made a statement about Nigeria playing a strategic role in Africa's single currency plan. Let's talk more about that role. Yeah. What should we know about it?
Yeah, interestingly, this has started a long time ago, since 1991, apparently, where Africa is trying to get a single currency. And I think if we can do this, this would be great for the continent, where we can trade amongst different countries within Africa and have a single currency. So they hosted the African Monetary Institute sometime last week. Nigeria hosted, along with the central banks in Africa. And Nigeria now has a permanent seat in the African Monetary Institute. We're leading the role in terms of Africa, the single currency. And I think this will bode well for Africa. Nigeria is taking a lead, and that's good for Nigeria. But I think for me is to see when we can get this single African currency. That will be a hit, just like the euro. So we can trade amongst countries. We have one currency. It's still going to take some time, but I hope it comes on stream as soon as practical.
It sounds like, the ideal utopia, pretty much. But what are some of the likely limitations to getting this going?
I think various countries have to ensure that macroeconomic stability. Before the euro, you saw what other countries were doing. So everybody has metrics to ensure that you keep inflation, your exchange rate, and all of that. Whether we can get that across 54 countries and how soon is the challenge. But I think if we can, like you said, it's utopia, is going to be great for Africa.
So you believe we have the necessary framework to allow for that to accelerate?
Well, I think the political will. So the African Monetary Union is under AU. So if the president and everybody's behind this, once we have the political will across Africa and the AU, I think it will happen. And it's something that we should all push towards as Africans.
All right. Well, and speaking of that, we saw African nations also rushing to sell their dollar bonds as the costs drop here. Why is this happening?
Yes, because there's a window. So borrowing costs globally have gone down and the sentiments towards emerging markets is going up, right? More than it was about 2 years ago. So interest rates are coming down globally. So Kenya, for instance, on Wednesday, they issued a Eurobond, I think about $2.2 billion. And what happened is that they issued that Eurobond and they used it to pay their costlier bonds. So rates are going down. They've got it at lower rates, about 6% or lower, and they're paying their higher rates about 7 or 8%. So they're sort of jumping into this window. There's a window. It might not happen for long. So we've seen Cameroon, I think Benin, our neighbors, Congo are issuing. Cote d'Ivoire is about to issue. So they're taking advantage of the lower borrowing cost and huge sentiments for Africa and emerging markets.
So a necessary reaction to it.
Yeah.
Do we see things moving in a different direction?
I think for now, sentiments are still among global investors within sentiments are positive for Africa. And if you see Kenya, for instance, their ratings were revised upwards by Moody's and S&P. So with African countries doing better, then the rates will come down. So I think for those who are doing well economically, they'll see lower rates. But for those that are not, they might not. But it's a window, and those smart African countries are taking advantage of it.
Right, as they should. Okay, well, I mean, let's talk employment now. You know, we've seen artificial intelligence has been the talk of the week with the AI Global Summit in India as well. Now we see UK startups choosing artificial intelligence over human hiring. What are the validations for this?
Yeah, it's an interesting story because, I don't know, is this the future of work? You know, interestingly, UK had the highest unemployment rates in 5 years, right? Because of something like this. So people are not hiring as much. Startups, especially, they're not hiring because they claim that labor costs are high. So minimum wage in UK is higher. You need to pay for different things like maternity. People are leaving within 6 months. You need to pay them. So the startups are saying, you know, they can't afford this. They'll rather just use chat boxes. They'll use AI or freelancers. So we were seeing the rise in freelancers, the rise in non-permanent work. So it's good on the one hand because startups reduce their costs, but when you look at in terms of labor-intensive countries like Nigeria and where does that lead us? How will this revolution, you know, change dynamics in the world, in Africa? Will it change? But we're seeing it changing in the UK, where startups are electing to use more AI and freelancers than hiring human bodies.
So what does the signal for the wider workforce in the UK currently, especially those who are startup targeted? You just alluded to a bit of it, actually.
Yeah, so interestingly, in the last 2 years, the rate of new businesses in the UK has grown higher, so highest in the last 2 years. So entrepreneurship is booming. So I think more than formal work, we've seen, especially the younger generation, the Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they're moving more into entrepreneurship. More than when we were younger, you know, when we finished school, it was, let me get a job, a higher paying job. But now, you know, they're finishing and they're starting businesses. So I think for the broader economy and the UK is more of businesses starting startups, and that will be the engine of growth for jobs in the future, I believe.
Right. So ultimately, no cause for alarm. Everyone is just trying to accommodate accordingly to what their needs are, especially the startups in this regard.
But I think also there's another story about Accenture, which is saying their senior leaders have to use AI or else they'll lose promotion. So AI is gaining ground globally, you know, so everyone has to ensure that they're on that train.
Right. And of course, there is a sensitization, the growing sensitization, rather, that it almost complements your work in many ways, as opposed to eliminate it. So basically, don't look at it as a threat, but almost a work companion. If you joined us midway, I've been chatting with Oguche, Agudah founder, HRISP Partners.